Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you are in the world, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Carl Anthony, and this is AutoVision News live at AutoSens and InCabin USA 2024. We are in the heart of the Motor City at the Huntington Place in downtown Detroit. Joining us now is Kristin White, Deputy Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, moving to that role only recently from the Chief Counsel position. Kristin is a transportation and mobility executive and strategic thought leader, ensuring our infrastructure investment plans are safe, sustainable, and equitable. Prior to the United States Department of Transportation, she served as the Chief Operating Officer of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, often written as ITS for short, ITS America, and served in state and local government at the Minnesota Department of Transportation and the city of Minneapolis. Kristin, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be in Motor City at AutoSens and InCabin. It's great.
Yeah. So your appointment by the Biden and Harris administration to Deputy Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration. Congratulations, by the way. That's a very recent announcement.
Thank you.
A happy time for you, happy time for us who support you and who look up to you. Tell us, Kristin, more about a two-part question. Tell us more about your role and then the work that the Federal Highway Administration is doing today.
Absolutely. Well, the role deputy is just what we think of, the French word deputized. It's number two in command. My administrator is a good friend and colleague, Shaylin Bott. Shaylin actually hails from this great state of Michigan, right close to Detroit. And he has served for the last 2.5 years for the Biden-Harris administration. And he and I work very closely together to do several things. One is to support state, tribal, and local investment through the Highway Trust Fund in transportation. That's on our interstate system, our road system, and our number one goal that we talk about, and I know that we're all thinking about here this week at AutoSens and InCabin, is using technology and investment to save lives.
Yes.
That is our primary goal. And so with that, we advise the Secretary of Transportation on those investments, the White House and the federal agencies, and the Biden-Harris administration.
Of course. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that provides $550 billion over fiscal years 2022 through 2026 for new federal investment in roads, bridges, mass transit, water infrastructure, and more. Kristin, can you help us gain a better understanding of this bipartisan infrastructure law? Tell us more about it. Help us understand it.
Absolutely. And I think it's mind-boggling as global citizens to understand the amount of investment we're making. This is half of a $1.2 trillion investment overall in infrastructure and transportation. And one out of every four of those dollars are funneling through my agency into states, MPOs, counties, cities, tribal regions.
Sure.
And one of the things we're trying to do is make a historic investment that we've never seen since the advent of the interstate system. And part of that is many of the 47 new discretionary programs and discretionary grant programs are in addition to the money that locals already get out of the Highway Trust Fund. These are programs like those that we can see here today participating in, like SMART grants. That's a program called Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation. That is a grant program to scale the technologies we actually see here in our industry. There are large investments like an Attain grant, which is a huge federal investment, but allows sensors and these scaled AV and other technologies to be integrated into these plans. So it's this idea that we're trying to think about how safer, more sustainable, more equitable our system can be invested in, and how we use technology like this to really plan for the future.
That makes sense. The Inflation Reduction Act provides over $5 billion in funds available through September 2026. Those funds are going to be used for 3 new Federal Highway Administration programs. Kristin, can you take us through those programs?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of the things that I'll highlight out of the Inflation Reduction Act is this ability for 2 main goals out of kind of the environmental movement. One is we are really trying to promote electric vehicles and reducing our climate impacts. As many of us may be reminded, transportation is the number one contributor to greenhouse gases globally, and America, that's no exception. So this idea is we have a joint office of energy and transportation between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation. I help oversee that program, and we're really trying to understand how we can support private and public sector investment to scale charging. And the second area is in America, we take our environmental responsibilities very seriously. So there's the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA, and there are some new streamlining requirements so that public agencies agencies are able to expedite those environmental approvals and permitting in a more expeditious manner, while also meeting the goals of keeping our communities clean.
Sure. Kristin, in late April 2024, NHTSA finalized its ruling on AEB. It's been a big topic of discussion here, especially around the requirements for speed and nighttime detection. From your perspective, how does this help contribute, or how does this affect roadway safety in the U.S.?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And I know, it's really top of mind, the minimum standards that the federal government requires or puts in place. And Sophie Schulman, the acting administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, she and the Federal Highway Administration and I talk very regularly on these topics. And I think there's a few things we keep top of mind. One is, she likes to say, safety is in their middle name. And so when we create these types of regulatory schemes and rulemakings, we need an enormous amount of data and research-backed science to prove how we'll require things like AEB. And so sometimes we have critiques from stakeholders saying maybe you didn't go far enough, maybe you didn't go too far. And what we try and respond is we are only as good as the evidence and research that's provided to us. And that's why we have these notices of proposed rules, so that we can get information from industry participants like those here. But we just have to remember the number one goal is ensuring that those types of products are life-saving technologies. In fact, I want to give an example. Just over the weekend here in Michigan, there was a horrific crash where 14 people were involved just north of here. Several people died, and there is an early argument that technologies like AEB, had it been in that vehicle, could have saved those lives, including children under the age of 18. And that's what we're here for, is saving lives.
Right. Kristin, your journey involves you as a counselor of the law. When did you decide that you wanted to become a lawyer, and when did you decide that you wanted to practice law? Take us through that time in your life.
Well, I'm really lucky in that I knew from a very early age I wanted to enter the practice of law. I grew up in a very small town in the state of South Dakota, in the middle of the Midwest of America, and my parents were school teachers. My entire family actually were school teachers, and because at that time South Dakota was 51st in the nation for teacher pay, despite me wanting to be a teacher, my parents had said, no, we won't let you because you actually need a career that can sustain you financially.
Sure.
And we didn't have that all the time. And so one thing that we talked about is, I said, I really like how as a teacher you like to advocate for your students and you support them and amplify them. And my mom sat me down one day and said, with some of the tribal communities I work with, you could do that as a lawyer, because lawyers advocate, they counsel, they provide advice just like I do as a teacher. And that was at the age of 7. And ever since then, I realized I wanted to be a lawyer. And thankfully, there are people who think they want to be in a certain career and then they practice it and they realize it's not for them. I had the opposite effect. I had great mentors, great peers in my law school, went to a wonderful law school in Minnesota, and it's really helped me, to your point, understand as a lawyer you learn how to think critically and with curiosity. And that is a great example, I think, of our industry. We are critical thinkers. We want to explore problems, be problem solvers, and never feel like we can come to know without asking how we get to yes.
Right. Kristin, that advocacy work that you do also includes advocating for women in automotive and the related tech industries and future mobility industries. Why is it important that we continue to advocate and make doors open for women in automotive? Why is that important?
Yeah, 3 reasons. First is, and we've talked about this, is the United Nations and the World Economic Forum have told us that it will take over 300 years for gender equity to be achieved in America. And that is one of the highest time frames globally. We are one of the countries where it's going to take the longest to achieve gender equality. That's alarming. And so that means we need to have interventions now. And the second reason is, in our transportation and technology sectors, less than 15% of those millions of jobs, in transportation alone, it's 15 million jobs, are held by women. And that number has not statistically increased over the last 15 to 20 years. And the third is, when you have a team with diverse expertise and experiences, you're more creative. Studies show you're more successful. You have more higher quarterly returns and success in your business plans. But those are just numbers. I think for me and for those of us here that have experienced some of the discrimination and really challenging environments, it's passionate because we want to create a field that's inclusive, makes us feel like we can be our authentic selves and valued. And I actually do feel like this transportation mobility innovation sector is one that's unique to explore that inclusivity.
Kristin, it's such a pleasure to be able to interview you. I know we've talked like a million times on LinkedIn, but to be able to do it for real in person, thank you for this, truly.
Thank you.
From all of us here at AutoVision News and Sense Media, thank you for sharing your expertise. Enjoy the rest of the show. Good luck on your keynote speech here in a little while. Safe travels back home, and let's do this again sometime real soon.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We appreciate everyone and their efforts to help save lives.
More to come from AutoSens and InCabin USA 2024 at the Huntington Place in downtown Detroit alongside Kristin White. I'm Carl Anthony, AutoVision News.